Hello everyone, it's Trent again for EV West. Today we're going to check out this 1966 912. West, and today we're going to walk through this 1966 912 that we converted a couple years ago. This car had once been electric powered, but previously had a DC motor in it. So what we did was take it, put an AC50, a little bit more modern setup in it, and gave it a lot more range. Okay, well, so just doing a quick walk around here, we see some things on the exterior that help with EV conversions, such as these Michelin Energy Star. These are green tire. Really do actually enhance your range. They're a little bit harder compound, but they're still a nice quiet tire, very efficient. Walking around the outside of this car, you'll see things 1966 had very specific door handles. As for an early car, these are what's called a short wheelbase version of a 911. These are the early cars, and they're about 2 inches shorter than the later cars, which would be 1969 and later. If we continue walking around here, we can see pretty stock exterior vehicle. Not every one of these 912s came with a 912 electric badge on it, but we see that here. Another cool feature in the window is you see a no 1.6 liter motor sticker, which is a good touch. We like that. And continuing to walk around, just some things in this car. It's completely bone stock outside. All the chrome's very nice on it. And you'll see he's done some events here. He's got a bunch of stickers in it. So from the exterior, we like this car. It's just a bit of a modded stock hot rod. So once we break into it, you'll see just how hot rod it is. Okay, so we're gonna open this front hood here, or the trunk rather, on a 911. And up front, we have our entire battery pack, which is 5 Model S modules, equivalent to about 25 kilowatt hour of energy. That's all encased in this black battery box here, all aluminum. And that's fairly simple. There's no BMS in this car. It's pretty early on. And these cells are so well balanced from Tesla that a lot of these cars don't need that. However, every conversion we do from here on out will have a BMS because it's much safer. So this car will likely get a BMS in the future. A BMS, for those who don't know, is a battery management system. And it watches the voltage of every single cell in your pack and balances those when you're charging or discharging, depending upon how you have it set up, typically just charging. So you'll see in here, this car was at one point done with a DC motor and a different battery pack, which is a CALB battery pack. And the energy densities now are much better. So that's what we did with this car. It's what we call a rework, in that it was converted before and we came through and kind of upgraded everything. And this is likely the last car that we'll ever do like that, because going through and changing stuff that's been kind of mangled already is a lot of work for us. And so that's not our typical job. You'll see here we have a couple panels that hide some of our components. Underneath here is a DC-DC converter and a 12-volt battery just to run all your lights and all the stuff you need for a typical car. And like a standard Porsche 911 or 912, it does have a guard there to hide some of the wiring for the back of the gauges, etc. Up front here is also your cutoff switch or maintenance switch to do any work to the car on the high voltage side. Some of the upgrades customers done, you got a little strut bar here, helps stiffen up your suspension some. And we come around the back here. Need to open this deck lid. Okay, so pretty svelte back here. We have our Curtis AC50 system. So this is a Curtis 1238 controller that powers an AC50 from HP EVS underneath. This is about an 80-85 kilowatt system, so a lot more horsepower than this 912 ever had initially, and definitely more torque. That's an AC induction motor, so this is real workhorse motor, almost bulletproof. We've seen very few of these fail, so a great setup, super reliable. Also back here we have coolant fans with a small radiator underneath and a coolant reservoir with a water glycol mix, which is just standard coolant. Those run through a chill plate underneath this controller to keep the controller operating at a temperature that's safe for it. Yeah, so underneath you'll see on the left side there's a heater, which is a resistance heating element and just pumps hot air into the cab. Obviously that blue can thing there is an AC50 motor. That's an AC induction motor from HP EVS. And up underneath the other side, there's a contactor box that holds all of our fuses and some instrumentation. Okay. All right. Okay, so inside, also fairly standard Porsche. On all of our EV West cars, we like to retain all the analog gauges that we can. Now, being that this side had nothing there, we went ahead and installed our Link Pro state of charge gauge. And as with other cars, you can see it's got things like state of charge, voltage, current amps, and your amp hour capacity. That's essentially just a backwards percentage counter. Temperature gauge monitors the controller temperature, which is more crucial than motor temperature typically. The tank is for state of charge. Tachometer works for that AC50. It'll run all the way out to 7,000 RPM, but really makes good power to about 6. Standard speedometer here, but his is in kilometers per hour, so he's got to do a little math in his head to know what he's actually traveling at, and a clock. Okay, you'll also note that there's 3 pedals there. This car is utilizing the stock 901 transmission, and this is a 5-speed, so he's got plenty of selection there. Stock throttle pedal down there. That's from a Subaru WRX, and that's compatible with our Curtis system. So we kind of went with something a little blingier down there. Also note, this is the Curtis Spyglass gauge. This gives you some of the things that are redundant with your standard state of charge gauge, but also RPM and some other statistics such as motor temp and controller temp. Other switches on the dash. We have a regen, that's for econo mode on or off. A reverse switch, which is reverse or forward, and a heat switch, which turns on your heater and back and pumps hot air into the cab. All right, well, we've got a little bit of daylight left. Let's go for a cruise up the hill. All right, well, we're driving down EV West Street here. If you look carefully, you'll see a ton of burnout marks. That's from our neighbors. That's not from EV West, just so everyone knows. So if you feel like you hear loud noises, like a car that's dying or a tire that's dying, that's not from us. Right, so this car being in relatively stock form handles like a true to the era Porsche. It's still very light, like a 912 would be, so the handling's nice and light. Other features that we really like about this car is the very nice positive shifting transmission. This car does kind of have a cool like stock red interior in it. I also really like, for some reason, white headliners. They're kind of hard to keep clean, but they just kind of remind me of a different era. Pretty neat. Does everyone want more burnouts in these videos? Do we need to start doing cars that do some burnouts? Let's grab some of those next. Bueno? Yes. So going up the hill here in San Elijo makes me think of one thing I wanted to tell you guys. The benefit of having this AC induction electric motor tied to this transmission means that with all that torque, you can start off in just about any gears. So going up this hill, I'll just stick it in 3rd gear from a stoplight and it'll lug up the hill just fine. All right, well, so 25 kilowatt hour, it might not seem like a lot, but in a light car like this, that's really gives you about 100 usable miles of range, and probably a little bit more if you wanted to stretch it. So it's really a great battery pack for this car, keeping it light, nimble, fun to drive, and very usable around town. I know this customer daily drives this car, but probably never goes more than 60 miles in a day. So it's a great all-around vehicle for him. Reliable, doesn't have to struggle to keep it running or anything, just hop in it and drive. So one of the options that we want to do as an upgrade on this car is add a BMS. Initially, when this car was converted, we didn't have a lot of good options for those. But now the price has really come down, so we can do a BMS in this car, which is a battery management system. We could do a BMS in this car for a really affordable rate. The parts alone are under $700, so that's really cheap insurance for your expensive battery pack. The advantage of a BMS is that it can balance your battery pack, which means that it brings all the individual cell level voltages to about the same. So when it's charging, you can get every single cell the most charge possible. Discharging is a little more difficult because the BMS can't keep up with the discharge rate that the car is drawing out of individual cells. But if you charge every cell to the very top, you'll know that if capacities are similar, you'll always wind up discharging those cells at the same rate. There we are. Well, that's kind of a cool view. Not exactly a surf spot, but if you look really hard, you can kind of see Leucadia. All right, well, just pulling back in. We're gonna go ahead and charge this thing up. Last thing to mention here, this is a standard J1772 charge port like all the EV West cars get. So we're gonna go ahead and charge this car up with our Electrify America charger we got. Thank you, Electrify America. A little beta test for them. All right. That wraps up our drive. Thanks for joining us.